I guess I can just talk. Yeah. Can everyone hear me? You can hear. Hi. Thanks everyone for coming out on a beautiful Friday night. Originally it's going to be about what's kind of a global underground railroad of associations, organizations, and individuals who are helping North Koreans escape from the country and also to find safe asylum in third countries. And I thought of it as a film that shows the network. And I started filming with some NGOs as well as a couple brokers and a couple pastors. But as the filming ensued, and we talked more and more about filming undercover in China, various people pulled out because of this very sensitive nature of filming undercover in China, and it became a film concentrating mainly on Dragon, who was the broker who there was this group of people who'd be okay with filming with him. I think they're members of the European Alliance for the North Korean Human Rights here, as well as maybe a couple. Yeah, there they are. And I don't know if there are a couple of North Korean defectors here as well. In case people have questions, there might be other people who these people who might be able to answer. Definitely. I'm happy to use the microphone. Yeah. So yeah, Dragon was quite the character. You know, he came in a shell tracksuit. He had 4 cell phones, and I don't know about you, but I don't trust anyone with more than 2 cell phones, let alone 4. And he was very slick, but he was very good at what he does, and so we can talk more about him if people are interested later. Yeah.
Yep. Can I just take one at the back first, and then I'll pass it.
Thank you very much. I only have 2 cell phones.
I'll trust you.
Dragon, obviously, as you said, the film largely became about him, and clearly a very, very interesting character. Is he holding back a lot of information? Did you get the impression that his work in China was not actually as dangerous, at least to him, as it appears, and that you understand what's coming, this kind of thing that's coming next, that some of the fees that the ladies are being charged is going to Chinese officials? Thank you.
So for the first question, I think Dragon was very confident about what he'd do. In fact, at the time that he basically ditched us was because it was the most riskiest part of the journey, and he had already been caught once and he served time in a Chinese jail. So I think there was risk. In fact, 4 or 5 weeks before we were setting out, there were 2 minivans of defectors who were caught between Jilin and another city up north. And so there was a sense of risk. At the same time, I knew like Dragon had his network really secure, so I felt that I wasn't putting my crew in inordinate risk. But yeah, so I think Dragon was very sharp and kind of knew which risks were acceptable and knew which he wouldn't take for himself. In terms of kickback to Chinese officials, yeah, that's a whole interesting realm. I'm not sure about the Chinese side, but there is a very interesting relationship between these brokers, they're called. They're actually human smugglers, but they're all basically helping North Korean defectors escape for a fee. And the fee is collected once the defectors arrive in South Korea at that place called Hanawon. The North Korean defectors get a stipend from the South Korean government, and they're given a bank card and they're shown how to use the bank machines, etc. And before they're released from Hanawon, from their training there, they're, you know, the Hanawon officials know all the brokers and know that the money is being wired to the brokers right from the Hanawon bank machine. So I think that they're like, the brokers talk with those officials as well about each of the defectors because they spend time with them. And I think part of the screening process about the defectors, are any of them spies, entails the North Korean officials interviewing the brokers about these people that have come in. So, yeah, there is an interesting amount of like legal and non-legal kind of collusion here.
Hi, thank you
Hi.
very much. My work mainly is to try to do empowerment work for the North Korean refugee women side. I think it's extraordinary that about 80 to 90% of those leaving North Korea are women, and the overwhelming majority are women. In terms of them working with the human traffickers or the smugglers, you just touched upon the fact that there is like a very contentious relationship between them and the smugglers. Can you present to us, perhaps from your own ideals, what could be the best way for the human smugglers to perhaps have a less kind of dodgy situation? I mean, I know
Yeah.
that China, does not, support them, and it'd be a little bit nefarious for the South Korean government to openly say that they're being supported
Yeah.
or abetted. But what, in your opinion, is the best way forward in terms of having things more, perhaps, regulated or more, enabled? I don't know what's the best word to say. What do you think?
Yeah, you raise a good point about the fact that most of the North Korean defectors right now who have been leaving are women, and a lot of them are in hiding in China, and their rights are certainly, they have no rights still, even in China. I'd say the best solution would be if we were able to lobby for China to recognize North Korean defectors as refugees and to allow them to process legally into the Chinese society or to move from there legally to another country. Right now, because of diplomatic relations between China and North Korea, China is bound to deport any North Korean, as you know, North Koreans back to North Korea. And so, because of that, I think, a lot of the North Korean are really at risk of being trafficked. Because they have no rights. They can't go to the police and say, "Hey, this guy's trying to sell me to this other guy." They can't do that. So I would say that's the ideal scenario. And secondly, and in fact, 2 Aprils ago, the Chinese government did pass some kind of legislation which said that North Korean women who are married to Chinese men, it was something about the status of their children, that they were legal, or that those women weren't necessarily going to be deported, which was an improvement. I'm not sure if that's still the case right now. But secondarily, in terms of smuggling, I'm not sure. I mean, I did a lot of research into all the various ways that North Koreans try to find safe asylum. And some of the Christian organizations who help North Koreans out, most of them are great. I don't think many of them go to the lengths of actually ferrying them across borders because of the risk involved. But some of them, like one or two of them, are pretty. There've just been some really bad rumors and allegations about sexual abuse and things. So it's hard to say whether, and like a Christian organization perhaps is even an alternative to think about, as opposed to these brokers who, by and large, they go, there's this understanding, there's this transaction. You talk to a broker, this is what's going to happen, and this is how you pay them.
Roughly how many North Koreans have got out over the years, and how many do you think get out every year? And I thought what was interesting in the film was the attitude of the South Koreans. They were saying there was prejudice against North Korean defectors, and why is that, and how do South Koreans view the North Koreans?
Right, roughly how many have gotten out? I wonder if someone from the European Alliance might know the numbers now about North Korean defectors getting out. Yeah. That's the wow, because I know that quite a few more have already settled in, more than like thousands and thousands have settled in South Korea. Oh, 1,000 elsewhere? Legally, right. Yeah. Right. Yeah. In Canada, for instance, Mr. Hawes might be deported, and a lot of the people there was a community of 500, 600 defectors in Toronto, and 2/3 of those people have already been sent back to South Korea. because of our conservative government. They discovered that they actually came via South Korea to Canada, so they've been turned back. I'm sorry, what was your second question?
Just generally trying to find out why are the South Koreans, they're saying there's prejudice against
Ah, right,
which
right.
seems a bit odd. I mean, 27,000 is not
Yeah.
massive numbers.
No. Oh, by the way, I mean, there's other groups that estimate up to a couple 100,000 still living in hiding in China. What would you say? Would you agree? Or it's all these estimates because there are people in hiding. Okay. Yeah. So there's large numbers without status outside of North Korea. And then you were saying about the South Korean prejudice. It's a bit like when the wall collapsed in in Berlin. So when East Germans were coming into West Germany, and there was a big cultural divide, a different sense of work ethic or whatnot, or training and just temperament. That would just give you an overview of how North Koreans are seen as the really backward poor cousin, and tons of them coming. They're getting a lot of money from the South Korean government. As you know, at first they were getting close to 20,000 in the very, very beginning, just for having arrived, and and so there was some kind of conservative backlash against all this welfare money going to these people, who then would have troubles entering the job work economy, because a lot of them came from a time when there was no work anywhere. There was no industry. Factories were closed. So for years and years, people did not work. And so to go into a highly, highly productive society like South Korea and somehow fit into the culture, it wasn't working.
Was there anything that any of the defectors said that they missed about North Korea, aside from their families?
A lot of them miss North Korea. Their villages. I think it's really family and place. Funny enough, a lot of them are very bitter about the government and the situation. More and more, like a lot of people are sending money back to families who stay. And in fact, a lot of the people in China are there because they're sending money back into their families in it's like a migrant work situation. They go and are exploited in China so they can send money back to their families in North Korea. Yeah. Do they miss North Korea? Yeah. And a lot of the people have the dream that, one day they could go back and run it themselves properly.
How was Dragon able to move around the area? How was he able to move between the different countries, was one question. And second, get the footage that you used of North Korea.
Yeah. So the footage from North Korea was from a North Korean cinematographer, just basically North Korean guy who had some cameras and other friends who were desperate enough to film and smuggle the footage out. And there are still people who are doing that. It's partly income, it's partly just anger and a way to try and get word out. So that was that. And so this fellow has an office in South Korea, and he has everything from mini DV tapes to DAT tapes to discs and cards of footage. And then, I'm sorry, your first question was?
How was Dragon able to move?
Yeah. That was a very interesting question, too, for me. He has 2 names and 2 passports. And I had this from my time working with him. I knew that he said in South Korea he has Korean officials following him. So at least in South Korea he's monitored, and yet it's understood that he's playing ball. I don't know. In China, it seemed like there was no one following him. I think he just knew the society so well, and had networks of Chinese or Korean people he would work with in there. Yeah, that's a good question. Did I like him? I was when I first met him, I was really wary of him, but I could tell that he knew his shit. He knew what he was doing. But then I got very when I first met the defectors in the northern, just north of the border, he had told me there were these 5 people who had signed on board, and we walked into this farmhouse room, and none of them knew that this woman from, Canada with her cameraman and soundman were going to be walking in on them just after they had escaped from North Korea. And I thought, he just told me they consented, and none of them even know that we're going to film. So a day of just sitting and talking, we're interested and on board. So at that point, I was like, this guy is just, what is he doing? He's cobbling together his own little I don't know, just he was doing something of his own with his own agenda. But then he kept his word with me, and he kept his word with the women too. So in that respect, he was up and up in all other instances. And when he was collecting money, he was using intimidating tactics, which really I was not comfortable with. And but at the same time, they knew ahead of time they were supposed to pay him. But this happens a lot to brokers once people are in safe territory. They don't need them anymore, and they never had to pay a down payment or a first payment, or so suddenly they have to pay the whole chunk at the end. They're like, I need this to start my life in South Korea, and they try to take off on them. So it was very interesting, because normally I like to work with protagonists who I really like, but he was a very complicated person, and I respect him, and I have mixed feelings about him.
This gentleman here had a question. Then we'll go to
I'm just curious to know what other destinations North Korean defectors like to go to apart from South Korea and Canada.
Mm-hmm. They do want to try and get to the United States, but also England and the Scandinavian countries too. I think, though, generally it's harder. I mean, can you tell us more about the case with North Korean defectors in Europe?
There are approximately 2,000 roughly in Europe. Most of them, roughly 1,000, are here in the UK.
That's good.
600 are here legally. The rest are, but most of them, probably 2/3, if not more, have been to South Korea before.
But they're not being deported back to South Korea?
Yes, they are.
They are.
Right now.
They are.
There was a case in the UK in October or November last year, which was the turning point, and now they are starting to process people and just sending them to South Korea.
See, I think that's happening worldwide. Yeah.
Hi. Why do you think it is that so many of the defectors are women?
Yeah, I think that it's because they know they can. Some of them knowingly go to be trafficked or to be sold as brides, and I'm not sure why else. A lot of the men go into the army, and they're gone for the army service in North Korea is 10 years, right? So the women don't do it. So there's that as well in the society, which means that there's a lot of women at home who are trying to make a living and keep their family going.
Back to Dragon. I was wondering, what did you think was in it for him, risking his arrest again, having already been arrested once, by having you with him, filming him? I mean, I have to say, as someone else who blocks out people's faces, I kind of felt that the shadowing was enough that they could hide. So even though you had blurring, that was my first question. My second question is, I follow the plight of refugees quite a lot around the world, and I know there's been a real clampdown in Thailand recently. The UNHCR office has closed, something to do with them criticising the King of Thailand. Or there's been, and a lot of particularly Pakistani refugees have been affected. So I was just curious, or I should say asylum seekers.
Yes.
So I'm curious to know whether you've kept in touch and whether that is now going to become a serious concern.
I didn't know about what's happening in Thailand now. I do know that fewer and fewer North Koreans are making it even outside their country now, more so than before. In terms of Dragon's motivation, I mean, to be completely honest, I had to pay him a fee, and I put it in my budget as a fixer fee. But that was part of his motivation. And secondly, he really wanted to tell his story. I think he's very angry against the regime, and he's quite a personality. I think he really, is used to being in kind of like a leader position in it, whatever. And so in that respect, I think he wanted to tell a story. But I'm curious, you think we really belabored on how much to blur or not, and yeah, you think? Yeah.
I think if people really wanted to identify,
yes.
it's too difficult.
Yeah. What kind of work do you do in terms?
I used to be in the BBC as a journalist for many years, and now, sorry, shall I say this? No. And now I report on what's happening to Christians under pressure for their faith around the world, which, of course, you mentioned at the beginning. You were talking to two pastors. There are a lot of Christians in North Korea trying to defect.
Yeah. There's actually a Korean-Canadian pastor who's just been arrested, but that was a whole other ball of wax. His church is called Big Light, the Big Light or Big Hope Church. It's a huge Korean-Canadian church network, but they've had factories there, trawling ships, businesses, and for me and quite a few people, it was just questionable whether it was a capitalist endeavor or a Christian endeavor. Yeah, but he's been arrested. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, hi. Thanks for the film. I just wanted to ask about the process of you making it. Really, how long it took for it to come together, and the decision to take the risk to go undercover and follow these people, and whether you thought that accompanying them would actually be a greater risk to them and their journey.
Yeah, that's a great question. So, first of all, in terms of how long it took, I was actually researching it first to write a novel. I'm of South Korean background, but my family were quite affected by the Korean War and the division into North and South. And, part of my family were socialist and the other were Democrat before they became communist and, Democrat. And so I was intrigued. And then as I was researching the novel idea, and reading people like Barbara Demick and a lot of these great authors who've written nonfiction about it, I realized there was, this hadn't been really done in Canadian documentary coverage. And so I pitched it and it went as a doc project. And we did a lot of research talking with NGOs based out of the UK and Germany and Canada and the States and Christian organizations. And, the first treatment that was greenlit was the Underground Railroad idea. And I had started principal photography in the United States and Europe and Canada. And so, some of my budget had already gone. A third of the budget went, and slowly these other people were dropping away. And it was quite a watershed moment to be thinking, oh my God, okay, these people, I don't have a film here anymore, right? And just had to really just think about, okay, what is the story that still should be told, and how can that be told? So this one became more about the smuggling side of North Korean defection. And then what was the second part of the question? Sorry. Oh, yes. 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 Yeah, in terms of the risks, it's hard to say, this story could have, I've wrestled with this question a lot. What amount of risk is reasonable or is rational, is required to tell a story, right? This story could have been told without us going undercover, but it wouldn't have been as long. And I wanted to, my whole aim was to first try and tell it through the point of view of the the defectors. So I actually wanted to do a lot more of following them, integrating into the South Korean society, but they all wanted to stop filming. I mean, I saw that one girl, Yong-hee, but after that, they all just didn't want to. So originally, my conception was to just kind of really, first of all, experience what it is to escape and the amount of risk and what it takes a person to take that amount of risk, and then to see what it's like to try and integrate into some society that's really foreign to you. But that latter part didn't happen because of access. So in the end, it became centered largely around the in terms of the actual places we shot, there were many parts of the journey that aren't in the film because of that. Locations are all they're not the actual cities, they're not the actual towns. Yeah, and it was just, I feel like we had each day clearly assessed. I have to go into Iraq to film on my next project, and so again we're talking about the same issues. In fact, one of my subjects wants to go and look for his missing wife and son, and so we're really assessing that. And the other subject is Iranian, and while it's safer for a film crew to go to Iran and film with him, it's less safe for him. The risks of him being just willy-nilly incarcerated by the Iranian government because he has internet presence is fairly high. So I've been talking to him about, well, maybe, do you want to talk to your family to see if you might want to meet in a third country or whatever. But for the Iraqi character, I feel like right now, he's from the South Syria area, and there hasn't been much conflict there. So I've been talking to his family, and they're divided, but he seems very gung-ho about going, so I would follow his lead and go with him.
There's another question in the first row, and then I saw a question back there, and gentleman here. Okay.
Sook-Ja mentioned that North Korea is not going to change and that the regime's never going to open up. But do you ever see it eventually failing and then opening up in the future?
Yeah, there's so many thoughts around it. That's what I would hope, and many I think would hope. If any other people in the audience have thoughts, would you have any thoughts around it, or? It's no. In fact, people like Dragon and others feel like they're kind of waiting for the day when the government is toppled and they can go back and build a structure or build on the structure. There are things like the Pyongyang University of Science and Technology, PUST, where the professors going in are usually Koreans in other countries, immigrants in other countries, and they go in thinking, as long as we can, educate these people, help build some kind of, and contribute to building an infrastructure, maybe long term, that will prove fruitful. But it's so hard to say. Jong-un's so young, the current leader, right? Do you have any thoughts about it? Yeah.
Hi. I guess I was actually a bit surprised to hear that you had paid Dragon a fee, just because I felt like for the film, especially for the second half, you were quite a character in the film, and you were quite open about the process of reporting and your negotiations around access. Did you think about actually stating in the film or showing in the film that you were paying Dragon for the privilege of following him?
I should have. I mean, I think now I should have. I speak about it every time I speak. It was negotiated far in advance. There was, yeah. And at the time, I talked about it with the broadcaster, and we said, well, I have this fixer fee. He's basically going to be fixing up the accommodations and travel while we're there. And he was paid what a fixer would have been paid. But yeah, I did feel like it was definitely on the line, on the fence of, are you paying a subject to be in your film? And I find it's happening much more these days than before because of reality TV, really. I think I'm curious to hear what other people think, but I think reality TV has created a convention where people expect compensation for sharing their life with the camera.
Was it CBC? Just curious.
TVO.
Oh, TVO.
TVO.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
No, no. He asked for payment at the end, which is what he does with all this. Which I feel is like, you know, wow. There's a lot of trust involved, I guess. Yeah. Yes.
Has the film been screened in South Korea or China? And if it has, what was the reaction? If it hasn't, why? And are you looking to do it?
It was screened in South Korea and parts of China. We've been actually not distributing it in China because now because of Dragon. We just didn't want to jeopardize things for him. Reception has been good. In South Korea, there have been a lot of films and stories around defectors because they're so prevalent in their society. Everything about how they integrate and different ways they've been doing commerce and things like that. Mm-hmm. So there's, yeah.
Do analysts have anything else to add, or maybe?
I think we're good.
No, nothing. Okay. Do you have any more questions? Or just additional? Oh, all right.
Sorry, just to come back on your point about is North Korea going to fall? My understanding is that it's probably not, because nothing is as it appears. Because though North Korea really annoys the Chinese, they don't want they prop up North Korea because they don't want to have a capitalist country on their southern border, because they need it as a buffer zone, so they will keep it there. South Koreans, although they complain about North Korea, and equally, you know, they're in a state of quasi-war with them, they don't want North Korea to fall either, because they don't want to have to pay for the cost of reintegration.
Yeah.
And you've sort of got to think about, well, you know, these states that did fall, like East Germany, well, why did it fall? It fell because the Soviet Union stopped supporting it, stopped backing it up.
Yeah.
China could switch off the power and the oil overnight and it would fall.
Yeah.
But I think, so although it's ridiculous and it's the most oppressive government, it's going to be there for a long time.
Yeah. It's interesting you say that, and I mean, the standard of living is rising a little bit. I mean, in the 90s and the early noughts were very awful for the majority of North Koreans, but now a lot of them are not starving. You know, they don't have TVs and SUVs, but actually a lot of them have, you know, iPhones and everything. Or not iPhones, but they'll have cell phones and things like that, or access to. It's not legal for most of the North Koreans, but they will have access to them. And watching movies, that's been going on for 15 years, you know, getting DVDs and watching it on computers. That's been going on for 15 years, and it's more and more common now.
We'll take the last question in back.
Have you had any reception from North Korea to your screenings, or any presence to your knowledge?
Receptions? Sorry?
Have they responded to you or spoken to you?
No, they haven't. Yeah, I'm not going to try and go there. But yeah, they haven't contacted me.
And thanks so much for your time. Just to wrap it up, I was wondering, you already started talking about your new project, and I was wondering if you'd like to add anything, the name of the film, if it's got a name, and when is it going to be out?
Oh, okay. The new project's called My Enemy, My Brother, and it's about two war vets who were enemies from the Iran-Iraq War. And one risked his life to save the other, and they meet by chance in a counseling center in Canada. And they didn't recognize each other at first, and they started going through, well, I was in that battle too. Yeah, there was a soldier who didn't even have a beard. He saved my life. And the other guy was like, I saved an Iraqi soldier. And anyway, they're both they're friends, and they're very good friends, and they're about to go back to Iran and Iraq to look for their missing family, a wife and son and parents, and we're following them. And I just, the story is just such a positive, inspiring story in light of all the coverage that comes out of the Middle East. It's something that kind of reminds us, actually, most people don't want to be in conflict there, and they're normal people. Some of them are very extraordinarily average people, but doing extraordinary things in their daily lives.
And when is it out?
Oh, so the short version is at Sheffield Documentary Festival. It's screening tomorrow and Tuesday, and we're in the middle of doing a web series. I'm trying to open up the documentary process while I'm filming, to engage in questions that have come up, like the Defector, but while we're filming, So that's, you can find it online, myenemymybrother.com. We're uploading footage as we go, and we're working on the feature.
Thank you so much. Thanks for your time. The film,
Thank you.
all the answers have been great.